move your coffee cup?
Not really, but...
What's up, YouTube? This is Chris.
This is Dusty.
And this is Wizard Labs.
Okay, Chris, what are we talking about today?
What's the name of this thing?
It is the... I wrote that down. It is the Metabones Speed Booster CINE Adapter. It's the Smart CINE Adapter.
Smart CINE Adapter. You guys have probably all seen the Metabones guy. That's this guy here. It's the most popular model for adapting any glass to any glass, really.
Specifically Canon glass to E-mount.
Yeah, we use it. We use the Canon glass to E-mount. They make it for Micro Four Thirds and a bunch of other stuff. But we pretty much only know the E-mount version.
So what's the difference between the new one and the classic?
So the classic kind of works the way you expect an EF mount to work. If you want to go ahead and grab a lens, we can lock it in. Takes two, baby.
So it goes like that, and then it spins and locks.
And locks. Yeah, pretty simple. Works just like a standard Canon mount.
This guy is the new one, and it is inspired by kind of a PL mount, which is a really classic mount that's popular in, is basically the de facto standard for cinema glass.
Mm-hmm.
And it rolls. So
this is a little, are we unlocked?
We are unlocked.
This is tricky, then we'll go over this stuff, but line up red on red. Are we, nope, let's see.
And here's one of the problems we have with this.
There we go, you're good to lock now.
Is it? No, it's not.
Is it sliding? There we go. Now it locked.
So it has the spinning adapter, and the locking element spins to kind of capture the lens on the mount.
I guess like we should probably say, because right now we're just kind of pointing out sort of the flaws on this thing, why we even got the locking
why
adapter
would you want
in the first place. And it's like if you talk to any operator that works on union shows and whatnot, they'll complain and complain and complain about EF mounts because they don't lock. When you put a follow focus on an EF mount and the motor starts to turn on the focusing elements of the lens will start to buck like this. And so you'll get these elements where you're trying to pull focus maybe in a dock scenario, and you're pulling focus and your mount bucks upwards, and you have an unusable first part of the shot until you cut in a little bit later.
The other benefit of this guy, in a perfect world, on the classic guy, the lens has to go in at an angle and then turn to lock. And this guy, the lens would go in one position, and the mount itself turns. And so if you have a lot of business happening on your camera rig, so like a follow focus, a lot of other things, and just it can be a pain, or like a servo, it can be a pain. You have to take everything off so the lens can come in sideways and then click into place. But if you just go in straight in and then the mount locks, that can be easier to deal with.
Yeah, and just to demonstrate what Dusty's talking about here, when you're going in, putting it on this camera, you're coming in, hitting, and then rotating to lock in. Well, if we were to do this lock again, if we can get the lock again, it's really tight.
There you go, yeah. It just goes in one position, if I can get it correctly.
And this is the hard part.
This is the hardest part, finding the exact spot it goes in.
Because it has to be completely flush. Because sometimes you'll think you have it, but it's like tilted slightly, and then it won't lock.
Exactly in there, and then it goes in. So the lens itself did not rotate.
Yeah.
So if you have a pretty big build out around the lens, that's handy. So we talked about the pros. Let's talk about the cons. One of the biggest problems I feel like is it's hard to know when your lens is actually seated right so that you can turn this and lock it.
And the other issue that we found with it, which is really prevalent with the 24-105 over here, is the gasket on the back of this is thick enough that it creates an issue when locking onto this.
Yeah, I don't know where the problem lies, if it's the Canon lens or if it's the adapter, but the margin of error on the lens mount must not be big enough to make every lens super smooth.
Well, I've only experienced it with the 24-105.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem with the 24-105 is when connecting it, you have to really get this side very tight
It's like
almost
Superman tight.
tight to the point where you think you're going to break something for it to actually start communicating with the camera.
What we would actually want out of this mount would be a combination of this mount plus this mount.
Something where it gives you some audible notification that the lens is seated correctly before you lock it.
Yeah, and it's holding it a little bit too. And that's
Yeah.
what the Red does. At least I've heard. I haven't worked with the Red EF locking mount, but operators love it.
One of the cons of the traditional mount is that it actually has a lot of wiggle built in. It's depending on the size of the lens. If the lens is pretty weighty, this classic turning mount, which is not Metabones' fault, this style of lock is not super secure, so you can inherently get more wiggle here.
Yeah, and that primarily affects you when pulling focus or.
Some of the workarounds is to get an adapter that connects the bottom of this guy to the bottom of your camera, so you have that added mount point, and then also a lens support. So if you have rails, you support the lens additionally.
Yeah, and that's sort of where this guy comes in. So if you let's say you're using the 24-105, you're on a shoestring budget, you don't have a lot of money for a variable zoom that has an actual mount point for the lens. This guy's going to get you more mileage because you can lock it in, and it keeps the lens like this, which expands as you zoom, very stable. But if you got that budget and you picked up a Fujinon or the Zeiss compact zoom, something like that, they have threaded points on the lens, and it's probably smarter at that point, if you're using rails, to have rails with a lens support and the standard Metabones, so you can easily pop on and pop off. So I guess really this guy plays well when you don't have rails or you don't have a lens support.
Right, and you generally have someone else there to kind of help you out, or your camera almost always lives on a tripod.
Or you just have one lens that you're using all day.
But if you're more of a wedding photographer, a solo shooter, you do not rig up your camera very much, I would kind of say it's probably better to go with the standard Metabones. It's just simpler, it's less fuss, and it gives you an audible click sound when it's on, and that lens won't come off. It may wiggle, but the big picture is your lens isn't going to fall off your camera.
Yeah, I think that's the fear on this one. When you're working by yourself with this, and it's really tightened on, and so you got the electronics communicating, and maybe you've got a rush, you're trying to get, you may be doing some doc style, wedding photography, something, and you're trying to get a shot off real quick, and you need a lens change. When you're swapping this out, there's the fear that once you hit that lock off, that it's just gonna fall off and hit on the ground. But if you're looking at the camera, you basically have to use both your thumbs on the side, and you're pushing. It takes a lot of pressure. Move, move, move. Yep, it's not even doing it. There we go. Now it came off. So you can see there's an environment where this lens would just tumble right out if you don't have another hand on the camera, or you're not on a tripod.
Or if you've got a pretty intense build out and there's really very little room for your fingers to get to the lens mount, that could be a bit of a nightmare if you have fat fingers like myself. Would we recommend this unit to buy?
I think it's really situational. It's based on what you're doing and what your needs are. If you are going to use just a single stills lens, you're going to use it through the whole day, 24-105, and you're running by yourself, I think that's a good buy because it keeps it so, that there's no wiggle that's happening.
Yeah. My feeling is for most people, this is probably overkill and probably not worth it unless you know an exact reason why you want this.
You need a specific reason. I mean, even because we took that on set recently, and one of our, I was asking our AC, Jim, if he liked it, and he said no, he didn't. He didn't like.
He thought it was too much work.
Thought it was too much work to get the lens off and on, and he's someone who's looking for the stability of the lens. But that's a situation where we're using the compact zoom. It already has lens support on it. So like in that situation, I mean, which is where I thought it would work better. I thought that the ACs and like operators would like it more because they love the locking mount for the
classic PL style.
yeah, the classic PL. You know, they love that stuff. So I thought it would work really well there, but the way that it's executed, it's not reliable enough. It's a little hard to do. You have to use two hands a lot of times, which means using your chest to come in for the lens to like hold it. It's a lot of goofy stuff that happens with it.
Yeah, so I would say, if you're a solo guy or lady, probably get the classic.
Stick with the classic. This guy, you know, it might wiggle on you, but you have a lot of workarounds. Dusty mentioned the bottom plate that you can use to attach it. We have one for our FS5. It's a plate that comes out from the camera and it attaches to this thread, so it holds the mount in place, and then you can use some lens support to hold your lens in place.
All right, see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.